Judging aesthetics is often undervalued in academic writings. Scholars are often more interested in interpretation and meaning of themes and more. Scholarly discourse is often less evaluative in a fear that someone cannot simply say why a TV show, for example, is so great. With narrative aesthetics and forensic fandom playing key roles in the success of Lost, it's okay in this academic context to say that Lost is a great TV show, a serial drama that, alongside others, has culminated in what is now known as the golden age of television. Welcome to the video essay, Lost, the Legacy of a TV Phenomenon from a Pre-Binging Age. Let's hit the pause button at the year 2019. When over 500 new scripted TV shows were broadcast or streamed in the USA. This figure is a huge 153% increase in just 10 years. With numerous streaming platforms to compete against the large television networks, a binge-watching culture has become a massive part of consumer culture. This, in turn, has led to a significant rise in complex seriality, and with that, issues and debates surrounding audience control through algorithms, machine learning, have become more relevant in our discourse. Whilst there's no suggestion that Lost is solely responsible for the start of complex seriality, other shows have just as much to offer in this argument. This video essay focuses on Lost as a TV and cultural phenomenon. So what is complex seriality? In short, complex narratives and other complex forms of storytelling have undoubtedly revitalised the television industry. Before game changers such as Lost became the leaders in complex narratives, serial dramas were often episodic in nature. Ultimately, TV dramas followed an infinite model. They never ended. Shows only seemed to end when they lost all momentum and audiences had abandoned them. One thing is for sure, complex serial dramas do have endings. As streaming platforms have influenced our consumption habits more and more, their formats have led to key changes in our viewing patterns. Their formats, more than anything, encourage binge watching. The complexity of contemporary shows' narratives and the format in which they are now presented to the consumer forms the premise of complex seriality. Complex seriality has a historically distinct set of norms and conventions. This in turn places a new age of complex narrative in a cultural and technological context. Essentially, part of what makes the complex narratives even more appealing is the ease in which consumers can binge watch them. Airing between 2004 and 2010 and created by J.J. Abrams and Damon Lindelof, Lost caught the attention of a global audience. Known for its unique blend of genre hybridity, complex characters, mythology, themes of faith, and spectacle, the show became one of the earliest phenomena of complex seriality. When looking at Lost's narrative aesthetics, it's important to note the context from which Lost comes from. We would consider Lost to be a cult blockbuster. Pearson and Gwendolyn Jones argue that the defining features of cult television are interconnected storylines that extend beyond a simple episodic format. Cult TV's imaginary universes support a range of possibilities, often encouraging close textual analysis and interpretation. You would say this kind of sounds like a contemporary mainstream TV show, but that's the point. Lost, alongside others such as Joss Whedon's Dollhouse and Alias, another J.J. Abrams creation, effectively started this whole cult blockbuster movement. The niche became the mainstream, the cult became the blockbuster. Traditionally, TV producers wanted to avoid alienating audiences by complicating narratives beyond the limits of a single episode. The blockbuster is typically associated with spectacle and the event. Just look at cinema's MCU as a perfect example of this. Lost does this, but with the components of a cult TV show. It is the epitome of a cult blockbuster. Even its mixture of cult actors and mainstream Hollywood stars adds to this approach. Did you know that Michael Keaton was originally in line to play the show's protagonist Jack? However, with the initial plan to surprisingly kill Jack off at the end of the pilot episode, Keaton turned down the role. In order to succeed, Lost managed to balance a line carefully between cult TV and mainstream TV by employing elements of the blockbuster alongside pleasing its niche audience via methods such as metatextuality in order to appeal to audience fascinations and encourage a movement of forensic fandom. One of the many things that Lost did so brilliantly was that it refused to wear genre references on its sleeve, preferring audiences to speculate and to confound our expectations through twists and reveals. This is further demonstrated by the show's extensive mythology building, narrative structure, themes and characters. Steve Neal is correct when he says in his genre theory that genres borrow elements from each other anyway. It is difficult not to create a genre hybrid in today's industry. However, doing this with the effectiveness of Lost is a different thing entirely. Over 16 years since it was introduced to audiences, it is still unclear as to which genre you could categorise Lost. Is it drama, science fiction, mystery? This is a testament to the team behind Lost and one of the many things that make Lost stand out in an incredibly saturated market. Structurally, what Lost did so brilliantly was establishing its intrinsic norms to the audience. The use of flashbacks was a great example of this. Each episode was framed around a character's backstory. This method of storytelling enabled the audience to engage with the humanity element of the story. It helped develop characters, and even made the death of the major character cut that much deeper. Once the audience took the flashback structure for granted, the producers quickly changed this norm by geniusly switching flashbacks to flash forwards, creating an entirely new structural dynamic to the show. Rather than being obsessed with how/if the characters ever got off the island, the season 3 finale made us wonder not how or if they got off the island, but who got off the island. This was further confounded by the polarising flash sideways of Lost's final season. This constant flipping and structural tinkering to the storytelling process in the show's latter half also showcased the producer's grasp of temporality. Throughout the show, characters, alive or dead, appeared in flashbacks or flash forwards, and Season 5 directly linked to time travel. Temporality was undoubtedly a huge component of Lost's complex narrative. This, again, made audiences not just consider the how, the if, or the who. It also made audiences consider the when. The producers commonly swept the rug from under us by using established intrinsic norms to manipulate our expectations and subsequently fool us in one move. Characters and multi-stranded storytelling were often components of Lost aesthetics that made it stand out above the rest, a convention that has since become the norm in successful shows such as The Walking Dead and Game of Thrones. Despite its intriguing mythology, the show was always about the characters. Carlton Cuse, one of the showrunners and producers of Lost, said, "We want the characters to focus on primarily their relationships with each other. We always view the show as a character show with the mythology frosting over the top." Not only were the characters lost metaphorically and figuratively, they were broken, complex characters that needed the tragic events that unfolded in the narrative to build and develop. Ultimately, they needed each other. This being the core message of the finale of the show, with the flash sideways representing a form of limbo and the characters needing to reconnect before finally moving on to the afterworld. The journey of each character was incredibly important to the show. Characters never remained in some form of stasis, they were dynamic and constantly evolving. Every action the characters made had some form of impact on the narrative. Every action had a purpose. As Q said, the show is and was about the characters, and there is no doubt that the producers succeeded in developing characters that audiences equally loved and hated. A key theme and motivation for many characters throughout the show's run were faith, science and philosophy. It wasn't uncommon for these themes to be explicitly shared with the audience, with clear uses of religious symbolism strewn throughout, and even by paying homage to the greats in the fields of philosophy and science by naming characters after them. Look no further than John Locke and Daniel Faraday. Whilst the themes were overtly presented, they also had great significance in character development and nuance. It was often the characters' infliction for faith and science that dictated their journey. Faith and science had a significant role in juxtaposing character motivations between two of the show's protagonists, Jack and Locke. This battle of wills continued throughout the show's run, eventually culminating in their showdown in the series finale. One of the most common topics of discussion around Lost was its mythology building. Enigmas were the driving force of the show.
Guys, where are we?
Was one of the main questions in the show, but other questions such as who are the others, what is in the hatch, and what do the numbers mean, provided further enigma that could be revealed slowly. Once an answer was revealed, another mystery was set. This is why Lost succeeded where other cult shows, like Twin Peaks, failed. Essentially, Twin Peaks lost its audience after their reveal of who killed Laura Palmer. The writers had no other mysteries to resolve, nor had they sowed the seeds effectively for other mysteries to successfully engage audiences further. The mythology of Lost became a source of much criticism for producers because not all mysteries were resolved. However, they did use the mythology to have lots of fun. Lost was full of Easter eggs that mobilised a participatory culture and nurtured forensic fandom. When we consider a technological and cultural context for Lost, it's important to note that it was broadcast in an era where the ability to download media, whether legally streamed or pirated, was a new way to access and consume media content. The digitality of such products enabled audiences to play and pause on their own free will. They weren't restricted by a broadcaster's schedule and ad breaks. This enabled a subculture of participatory culture to grow, forensic fandom. So what did Lost do so well to encourage forensic fandom? Well, despite the central narrative, the producers were very clever in their use of intertextual and metatextual referencing. Firstly, they recognised what audiences enjoyed about the show and embraced common topics of discussion that were prevalent on discussion boards across the web. An example of this was Jack, Kate and Sawyer's relationship. There was vested interest in who Kate chose. However, as the show progressed, a tongue-in-cheek fanbase pushed for a Brokeback Mountain-style relationship between Jack and Sawyer. So much so, the character Juliet directly referenced this in one episode, a nice nod to the audience.
So you screwing Jack yet?
No. Are you?
Audiences didn't stop there. The subject was emphasised further when content producers edited their own parodies of Brokeback Mountain by repurposing clips of Jack and Sawyer. Other examples of metatextuality within the show were nods to the Boston Red Sox winning the World Series for the first time in over 80 years. Jack insisted that they'll never win. In a later episode, Jack is surprisingly shown footage of their victory. One notable character seemingly acting as the audience's connection to the real world was Sawyer. Sawyer was a character who seemed to close the gap between Lost's narrative world and our world through his never-ending long list of pop culture references. He became one of the character's trademarks.
Welcome back, Dr. Wizard.
I think it's Mr. Wizard.
Shut up.
Notable references made by Sawyer were clear allusions to Lost inspirations, for example, The Lord of the Flies and Robinson Crusoe. Another key component of Lost's aesthetic that further encouraged forensic fandom was its Easter eggs and puzzles. These visual Easter eggs were further reference to the producer's metatextual approach to the show's world building. The Easter eggs and puzzles were another direct nod to the audience's passion and dedication to unearthing every possible clue to the show's primary enigmas. Whilst Easter eggs often provided clues to the show's mysteries, answers were never revealed. It wasn't an expectation that the entire audience would engage on this level. Nonetheless, the producers encouraged a new method of consumption, one that enabled viewers to binge and immerse themselves in the product, so that they could resolve as many mysteries as they could, / theorise in a participatory culture mobilised online. This attentive level of consumption and investment in the show, coupled with the complexity of its various aesthetics, contributed to an audience that is given more of a cognitive workout than any other product previously. In Steve Johnson's work titled Everything Bad is Good for You, How Today's Popular Culture is Making Us Smarter, he introduced academics to the sleeper curve premise. He argues that as media products have become more cognitively stimulating, they have consequently trained audiences for skilled jobs in the digital age by building comprehension and problem-solving skills. The sleeper curve refers to the idea that cultural saturation has impacted on rising IQ levels. Complex TV and other forms of complex media, such as gaming, are more commonly seen as intellectually demanding exercises, consequently performing a process for society. Entertainment time, or when look at this from a capitalist perspective, leisure time, is not a continuation of the work process, or labour time, it is the work process, for work in the hyper-industrial age. Complex seriality has consequently become the platform for cognitive development. Bernard Stiegler's ideas around hyper-industrialism imply that society is part of a calculable industrialism. Part of this is cultural capitalism, whereby control takes form through aesthetics. In other words, this cultural capitalist society that we live in is commodifying our attention for its own means. Consequently, consumerism produces consumers who are numbed by the compulsion to repeat. This brief analysis of consumer culture grounds the argument that audiences are being indoctrinated for capitalist gain through their obsession with consuming television. In essence, complex seriality is a means to control the consumer. Despite Lost not being a show released firmly in the binge-watching age, its methodology of complex narrative aesthetics and its application of metatextual techniques, urging a subculture of participation, has still enabled networks to commodify the attention of the audience. As you would expect, Lost is currently available on various streaming platforms, encouraging new audiences to engage and binge it in the more contemporary method of consumption. However, when it was originally broadcast, the limitations of traditional scheduling, their format, and a lack therefore of streaming platforms made it very difficult to binge watch. Each episode was broadcast in its dedicated weekly slot. In its early run, the UK was a whole season behind, so there are always going to be the methods that audiences endeavoured to seek in order to access the show. For example, legally shipping the DVD of the show from the US was a simple but equally clever move for keen fans to access the show. Initially in the UK, Lost was broadcast on the free-to-air broadcaster Channel 4. However, from the third season onwards, Sky TV, a subscription-based broadcaster, bought the rights to the show. This further encouraged audiences to find other ways to access the show, in turn exacerbating rising issues around piracy in the early 2000s. Nonetheless, this still enabled audiences to engage with the uniqueness of Lost. Although Lost was strictly broadcast weekly, the show employed various clever techniques to encourage attentive viewing, and therefore binging, in order to plug the gaps in the 7-day wait between episodes. On top of the inclusion of Easter eggs and puzzles embedded within each episode, the producers also took advantage of the traditional weekly scheduling to engage audiences in between episodes. Lost was an innovator in transmedia storytelling. The use of viral marketing products such as TV adverts for fictional companies associated with the show, such as Oceanic Airlines, engaged the audiences throughout the week. The viral marketing techniques employed by Lost producers extended beyond advertisements. The immersive Lost experience, which included real-world puzzles that led audiences on elaborate scavenger hunts to find clues around the world, further encouraged the more attentive, obsessive viewers to endlessly binge the show's ever-expanding properties. At this stage, viral marketing was a fairly new method of marketing, with very few notable examples from within the entertainment industry. Two standout examples were campaigns for the films The Dark Knight and Cloverfield, the latter being another J.J. Abrams creation. Both used metatextual websites and other channels of communication to slowly reveal snippets of information to their respective audiences. This is another great example of control and audiences' attention being commodified for capital gain. Viral marketing effectively blurred the lines between fiction and reality, a true example of Baudrillard's hyperreality concept. Lost's ingenious application of transmedia storytelling transcended beyond viral marketing, leading to other products such as board games and video games. These other forms of merchandising vitally also contribute to the canonical narrative of Lost. As ethically questionable as some of the viral techniques employed by Lost may be, there is no doubt that they helped encourage forensic fandom even further, nurturing attentive viewing and consequently encouraging binge watching in a pre-binge watching era. As this video essay draws to a close, let's consider the cultural impact of Lost. First and foremost, Lost has and always will be an influencer. Lost was responsible for multiple cultural breakthroughs, in particular with its innovative approach to encouraging a participatory culture and its unique relationship with its audience. As previously mentioned, the writers were always aware of the audience's opinions on the show and tailored minor elements within the show as a respectful nod to the fans that they were listening. Without the internet and a passionate audience sharing their opinions on fan-made forums such as Lostopedia, this simply would not have happened. In that sense, Lost was the right show at the right time. Towards the end of its run, as social media usage became more prevalent, the producers took the decision to globally simulcast the finale, a truly unique move. Simulcasting or global releases has since become something of a norm for both streaming platforms and broadcasters. The globalised nature of the entertainment industry has ensured that all audiences now gain access to the products at the same time. Nearly 17 years since the fateful crash of Oceanic Airlines Flight 815, Lost legacy lives on in other shows that have undoubtedly drawn inspiration from it. The complexity of the show's characters, narrative, and mythology/world building has influenced and impacted on the success of contemporary serial dramas. Look no further than shows such as Game of Thrones, Stranger Things, and Leftovers, to name but a few. Ultimately, Lost caught the attention of millions in a post-9/11 world when an audience needed some form of escapism and optimism. It was different, it challenged the norm, changed television, and consequently contributed to the rise of complex seriality and the golden age of television. The producers of the show beautifully embraced technological and cultural context at the time to hook viewers and develop an early onset of attentive viewing behaviours that would later form what we now all call binge watching.